Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
You have to run to stay in front. Welcome to another episode
of Unfiltered, only on Past the Wire TV. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another and the first unfiltered episode of the Saratoga meet underway with Michael Wilson, my co-host, up at Saratoga. I don't want to say jealous, but I'm a little, I don't know. You're there and I'm not.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I mean, it's kind of the place obviously everybody wants to be, but you know, you've been here probably a lot more years than I have. So, you know, I can probably be jealous of your past experiences. So
I spent a lot of time up there, that's for sure. But Saratoga never gets old, you know, even though I'm critical of it, I'm always the first to say it's not the same, you know, but really nothing is. And it's still a phenomenal place, a phenomenal meet, and just, you know, definitely the place to be for horse racing. Weather aside, and I know it's raining today, weather aside, I'll take it over Del Mar, even though I'm a beach lover and I love Del Mar too. Just something about Saratoga. You know what would be ideal? Racing people never listen to anybody else. They should run the Del Mar meet in July. Boom. And the Saratoga meet in August. Boom. There you go.
yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. You know, that they're very different, obviously. Saratoga is extremely intimate. The whole town's all about racing. You know, everybody here comes to be here for the races. I love Del Mar. Obviously, I'm from California. It was my home circuit where I grew up and kind of came about on the scene. Del Mar's a lot more relaxed, but the difference is in Del Mar, most people are in Del Mar on vacation and happen to go to the races, whereas people come to Saratoga specifically for the races. So
Right.
There's a lot more excitement in the air. I mean, the crowds at Del Mar are electric as well, but you just don't, you know, if you walk down to downtown Del Mar, you might run into a couple people from racing, but everybody's typically rented villas or whatever. So you don't run into as many people. It doesn't have the same atmosphere of Saratoga on a daily basis.
One of the things that I loved about Saratoga, now you got to realize when I was a kid, the town was much more, it was always commercialized in August, but it was much more quaint, okay? And there were less restaurants and the popular restaurants, there were even less of those, okay? And every popular restaurant for the month of August, there was an hour, 2 hour wait to get in, you know? And one of the great things as a kid, you know, to me, you know, the riders and the trainers were like, you know, baseball and football players to a lot of the other kids. To me, those were the guys like I was like, you know, watching. And you know, back then you go out to dinner and you know, you'd see the top riders out to dinner with their families. You know, they were friendly, accessible, would say hello. You'd see the top trainers and owners out in the restaurants and whatnot. And that was just part of the magic of that meet for me as a kid, because not only did you get to see these, you know, athletes and quote stars compete during the day and you were betting on them and watching them, but then you go out to dinner at night and, you know, more times than not, you'd see one or two of them out with their families and whatnot. And, you know, I was always impressed or always took notice of the big fancy cars and the way they dressed and the way they acted. And, you know, it was a great experience for a kid growing up, you know what I mean? It was one of the things that just furthered my love for the sport going forward. And most of them that I got to meet and got friendly with were really nice. Like, you know, Angel Cordero used to send me to buy the racing for him. I got very friendly with his daughter Merle and somewhat friendly with his son Tom. Eddie Belmonte, who was a top rider back then, I became very good friends with his two sons, Eddie Boy Belmonte Jr., who was still my good friend to this day. And his other son Willie, who passed away, they're just great people. We used to chase each other around the paddock trees. roll up the programs as whips and race, you know what I mean? In between
Yeah.
races, get yelled at by the Pinkertons. It was just great experience back then, you know?
Well, I think you've hit the nail right on the head, right? For whatever reason, and it's interesting how New Yorkers get this gruff type of exterior of New Yorkers aren't friendly. I feel more at home with more community in New York. And yes, maybe New Yorkers aren't as outgoing and say hello to you on the street as somebody in California will, but you know, when I come to New York and I come to Saratoga and I've been around guys that I've either trained against or, you know, ridden horses, it's like seeing long lost friends, you know, and there's just such a community here on the East Coast racing scene and in New York specifically that it's so much fun. And the nice thing is being on a different side of it now, because before I viewed most people as competition because I was trying to beat them every day. Now it's nice to be able to go up and congratulate guys and say they did a great training job with that horse and, you know, excellent job versus, you know, before it's like, gosh, how do I beat you next race? You know, so on and so forth. So it's a lot of fun.
You know, getting on topic, there are two things I always say it's never too early to talk about. Okay. The Kentucky in our sport, the Kentucky Derby is one. You can talk about the Kentucky Derby anytime. All right. Yeah. I know
The first Sunday in May, we can talk about it again, right?
Right, exactly, right. The first Sunday in May, you can start talking about the Derby. I know it's a little early for that, but the Breeders' Cup's the other. Never too early to me, as a fan / student and better, to start looking at and talking about Breeders' Cup horses. And it's important for so many reasons. As a better, when you start watching these races and taking notes and formulating ideas about horses that you can wind up seeing at the big dance come November this year at Keeneland, yeah, the Breeders' Cup. When you go to actually handicap and start studying, you've got a leg up on a lot of the competition who aren't even thinking about that yet. You know what I mean? And for me, Breeders' Cup is a major betting event. You know, I'm going to bet a lot more on the Breeders' Cup than I am on Thursday afternoon at Saratoga, or Friday afternoon at Saratoga. So you want to be prepared, you know? So I think you came up with a great idea where we're going to talk about, you know, this week and some other weeks in the Saratoga and Del Mar meets for that matter. Did we see any Breeders' Cup runners this week at Saratoga?
I think we saw a handful, and I think we're going to go race by race and discuss what you and I both see in them. And what's interesting about Saratoga and Del Mar, which is why I know so many people pay attention to the win and you're in races.
Right.
Saratoga probably provides, because it's a thing that might not always be thought about of, okay, yes, it might be a grade 3, or yes, it might just be a regular stakes race, but you still get talented horses on the come up coming through the ranks. But the environment with the amount of crowds, with the amount of people, is great for simulating what some of these horses are going to face on a big day in the Breeders' Cup. And you'll see it, John, and I'm sure you see it all the time from a handicapping angle. When you look at horses that run a big race at nobody on a lesser circuit and then bounce when they finally face something that can run a little bit on a bigger circuit. So I thought that there's a handful, especially some of the 2-year-olds, and, you know, but we're going to go, I think, race by race and discuss what we're looking at and what we're seeing. And, you know, let you know if some of these could be horses that will be in the starting gate. And, you know, I think John and I are going to do another show with the Breeders' Cup where we talk about pretenders and contenders as it goes forward. And so we'll see if any of these might look to be contenders coming in the Breeders' Cup.
Absolutely. We're definitely going to do that. Every year we kind of do a contender and pretender Breeders' Cup thing. And it gets tougher because it's a tough thing to do that because there's so many contenders, you know what I mean? And you hate to do a show where you look at you know, 20 horses and 15 of them are on the contender list as opposed to the pretender list. But we thought that was going to happen on our pilot and passenger show, and it really didn't. We thought, you know, there were going to be a lot more pilots than passengers, and it kind of worked out pretty good. So maybe it will for the Breeders' Cup as well.
Agreed.
I'm looking for something so we could talk about her first. And I will get there. But the first race I think we're going to talk about is
Schuylerville.
Schuylerville. And,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just, you know, I'll tell you this. Okay. I liked Just Cindy better than Lucas's horse going into the race. And that was an unpopular opinion. The buzz on the racetrack, and no, you weren't quite up there yet because that was open.
I was driving up. I was
Right.
getting from Kentucky. Yeah.
Okay, let me tell you the buzz. Okay, the buzz was, and this is something that's just a pet peeve of mine. Quote, Lucas's horse is a freak. Quote, Lucas's horse is a monster. Quote, Lucas's horse is working lights out. You know, when they start throwing that freak stuff around, this, that, I automatically start looking for nicks in the armor. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't help myself. I just do, you know. And when I looked at the race, I didn't really see any with her. I'll be honest. But I saw a horse that I liked better. I watched the 2 replays of their wins a bunch of times, watched the workouts, saw the fast workouts with Wayne's horse, saw all the pedigree that everybody was talking about. And I liked Just Cindy better than her. And the reason was in her debut, you know, she showed the ability to take some dirt in the face, not be intimidated by it, and come on up and pass horses. Okay. And in my opinion, as a 2-year-old, you know, even a precocious 2-year-old, early in their career, first or second start, you know, I think a horse that shows that, and from a horseman's perspective, I can't wait to hear your opinion, but I think a horse that shows that, in my book, always gets a little bit of an edge or an upgrade from a horse that just got out, got on the lead, had it her own way, and maybe even ran faster or, quote, on the surface more impressively and got that wow and that big figure. And that was that exact kind of scenario to me in the Schuylerville. I'm like, you know what? I like Eddie Keneally's horse better today and going forward because she's already shown she can take some dirt in the face. She can take a little adversity. She doesn't need to have the lead to win. And these 2-year-old races almost always have a lot of pace in them. So it's difficult to get that clear, easy lead. And it worked out well. And I think Just Cindy is definitely a Breeders' Cup type filly and a filly that can make a lot of noise going forward. And I didn't really feel the same about Wayne's horse coming out of the race, and I didn't feel it going in. Now, can she rebound? We'll see. But I think it's pretty safe to say that she's not the freak that everybody had her labeled as. And certainly she wasn't worth that, you know, 4 to 5 price that she was going into the starting gate.
Yeah, we covered this on a previous show where we talked about 2-year-olds and 2-year-olds coming out and winning early and how that can actually sometimes be detrimental to them when they go out and they win easily and then they actually have to face winners in their second out. Because the way I always looked at it with preparing 2-year-olds is you're trying to prepare them for their career. Now, you can prepare that in the morning. You can breeze them in company in sets of 2s, 3s. You know, I even saw it with Mandela where we'd put 4 or 5 2-year-olds out there together and have horses behind and one go up the rail and one split horses, you know, and each week we'd play around where they were positioning on the track. But nothing simulates a race like a race. And so when you never face adversity in a race as a younger horse, and then all of a sudden you're now facing better horses, and you do face that adversity, it's a much bigger hindrance on these horses as mentally more than physically. And what a lot of people might not touch on in our sport is it is, in my opinion, racing is same as any other sport. It's about maybe 60 mental, 40% ability. And the mental aspect of the game far outweighs ability. There are so many times in this sport, and it might not be easy to see on the surface, where the tougher horse mentally beats the more physically impressive, more athletic, better freak, because that horse can't handle it when his feet are held to the fire. So I do tend to shy away from 2-year-olds who go wire to wire first time out, because the next time they're not going to get that easy lead. They're not going to get become unpressured in a race. They're going to have another horse look them in the eye and push them on the fence. And so horses that have done that and had that experience of taking dirt in the face, having a little adversity and still being able to win and overcome that, they've already felt that in a race. So now when they face better competition, when they face the same type of scenario, they handle it much better. So I agree with you on that point, John. And, you know, same thing for me. I didn't hear the hype of the Lucas filly because I obviously wasn't up here, but
Right.
the way I saw Just Cindy win, for me, obviously Justify had some setbacks that didn't have him come out until he was 3, but how he is built physically and how his yearlings were when I inspected them at auction, I would not have anticipated them to be 2-year-olds. Same thing with Gun Runner, right? You look at Gun Runner and his babies, you wouldn't expect them to be 2-year-olds. So I expect this filly to continue to go on and improve just based on what I've seen with the Justifies and how they look physically, you know, at age 1 and 2 thus far.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say, you know, she is a Justify, and I found that interesting because I think the jury is out amongst a lot of the bloodstock people as to what type of sire he is really going to make. Of course, I'm not talking about where he stands and the hype and all of that. I'm talking about, you know, the other opinions, you know, the people that are like, well, we'll wait to see. And, you know, he retired early, and, you know, how much did he really do? I think he did a lot in a short period of time, and doesn't really get the credit he deserves, even though he's a Triple Crown winner, because he retired so soon and had such a short span. But he's had an already impressive winner in Europe. And now he's got this one. So I think he's off to a maybe better than expected start by a lot of people. And I'd like to see him turn out to be a nice sire. And I think that, you know, Just Cindy is a hell of a nice start here in the States. And like I said, he's got a nice start over in the UK as well. So that's pretty interesting.
When you look at stallions in Kentucky, and this is something, American Pharoah, I thought, was a phenomenal racehorse, and he's a good looking racehorse, and he's a very good looking stallion. But Justify is in a league of his own. You know, he's kind of like that. Okay, Secretariat. Now, some people could have said Secretariat was a flop, but he's been a very good broodmare sire. But Justify, what I saw, I liked a lot of his horses at auction as yearlings. I liked a lot of his fillies potentially more than colts. So I think it's going to be very interesting how that plays out. He had a really nice, I mean, phenomenal looking 2-year-old at the Phasig auction at Gulfstream. And it was with Kieran Dunn and his consignment. I forget, the horse went for 1 point something million, but he was an exceptional horse. But what I saw was, what I really liked is what I saw with his fillies. And they kind of had his size, his scope, his muscle, his 2-turn ability. And so he's very interesting. Kind of like when you look at Secretariat, you'd want to say he's a miler because he's just so big and strong, you know, as when he was a racer. Justify similar. So has this physique that you'd say, okay, he could sprint, he could go a mile, but he also had the scope that he could go 2 turns. So I think he's going to be very versatile. Maybe just my memory, I remember, and a lot more of his fillies stood out to me at auction when I saw them than the colts. The colts were also very nice, but, you know, I think his winner in Europe was a filly as well, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so I think we'll see some of the fillies maybe be a little bit more precocious and come out and bang. The boys are like him from what I've seen thus far. They're bigger, they're heavier, they might need a little bit more time. They're not going to be quick to come around on their own. But I think you'll see a lot of stuff coming out from the fillies in the 2-year-old crop.
Might be a colt. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I have it in my notes, but I don't remember. And that gives me an idea for another show. I don't want you to answer this now, but we've got to do a show sometime in the future where you talk about, because you mentioned Secretariat and you mentioned Justify. Now, I grew up in the Secretariat era. Okay. I was 10 when he won the Triple Crown, but I was already heavily involved in paying attention to racing. And everybody thought he was going to be the sire of all sires after what he did on the racetrack. And like you said, he really wasn't. I don't know that he was a flop. And like you said, he was a good broodmare sire. But what I want you someday to talk about, and we'll do a show on this topic, is what makes a horse a broodmare sire as opposed to just a sire? And
Yeah.
if there is an answer to that question, because there are some horses historically, like you said, that turn out to be great broodmare sires, but not racehorse sires in general. You know what I mean? And there's got to be something genetically to that. You know what I mean?
I'll give you the quick trailer because I won't answer the full question, but we'll give a trailer prelude into it. The good broodmare sires tend to throw horses towards the mare, and the good colt and stallion sires that throw good racehorses replicate themselves as racehorses. Okay. So you'll see it with, and we'll get more in depth, but Bernardini, they come in all shapes and sizes. They tend to look more like the mother than him. There might be pieces of him in there, but you'll see, if you see, you know, an Into Mischief when you see it. They all look the same. They're all very much stamped. Okay. Broodmare sires, they look more like their mothers, and they'll get some attributes from the stallion. But I can go completely in depth on that. But there's our minute trailer on that next show.
We will do that because to me that's a very interesting show. Now, before we move on to the next race, a chance for Lucas's filly to bounce back, or was she exposed that she just might just be not all that she was cranked up to be?
I don't think you can personally ever count out Wayne. You know, has he had good 2-year-olds in the past that have come out and won early? Yes. But I've always thought of Wayne as a guy who had 2-year-olds coming in August and September, really finding themselves and then gearing themselves up towards the Breeders' Cup, and then obviously transitioning into the 3-year-old year. So, you know, for me to see that she won well early and there was a lot of hype around her, you know, it could have been just a situation of her filly on the day. If she has to face Just Cindy again, I think Just Cindy was going to continue to improve, but I wouldn't count out Wayne because it's personally, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, John, from a handicapping perspective, but it's uncharacteristic of Wayne to have 2-year-olds ready this early in the year performing at their best.
At this point, I would say yes. Years ago, I would have said no. This was his game. He was dominant in these 2-year-old races, and they came ready, and I would have had a completely different opinion of this filly if this was in the 80s. So, you know, but today I would tend to agree with you. Mo Strike is a horse that you know a little bit about. Impressive Sanford winner. Was able to, you know, go from a wire-to-wire win to a stalking kind of win. And I would say even an authoritative type of win. And if, you know, I watched the replay again this morning because I knew we were going to talk about him. And he was geared down the last couple of strides. I mean, the race was over, granted, you know what I mean? And I don't know that he would have won by more, but I mean, Flo said, you know, race is over, I've got it, and just kind of eased him down in the last, you know, 10, 20 yards. He was just galloped to the wire, whatever it was. And I thought he was very impressive. I did not like him going into the race like I did the other winner. I actually liked the other horse coming out of Kentucky, Tom Amos's horse, Curly Jack, who was a good magic colt that I thought showed some talent in his debut. He ran okay. I think he would get a lot out of the race. But Mo Strike definitely was the star of that race and definitely stamped himself, if nothing else, a serious contender for the hopeful Breeders' Cup potential. I mean, you know a lot about him. You've been scoping him and have some involvement with him that you can talk about. So what's your take on it?
So Mo Strike, to me, I definitely think is a hopeful contender. And I do think he will be a type of horse that you need to pay attention to in the Breeders' Cup. I think the numbers that he put up are, you know, to see 2-year-olds at this time of the year put up those types of numbers. For some people, I handicap off Equibase. It's always worked for me for claiming, for finding class, for understanding what horses are. That's what I use. And seeing what he's put forth thus far, to me, he's ahead of the curve. John alluded to something. Back in 2020, my father-in-law asked me to go to auction to buy him a broodmare, and my wife was very upset when I came back with a weanling. And so there was a Featherbed, was a grade one place, went a grade one place filly for Todd Pletcher going into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly. She was scratched, and this was one of her foals. So when we went, I looked at her and I said, I like her a lot. She RNA'd. So we bought her privately as a broodmare. And Featherbed, interestingly, in the pedigree, she had one horse, Dynamic, I can't remember, but half brother made $500,000, ran in the Preakness. And then two unraced half sisters. One is the dam of the OBS More Than Ready sales topper, $1.2 million sales topper. And then the other one is a dam of the stakes horse already. So when I went to auction, being excited that we have this half sister I tend to look at everything that comes from the family. So he very much looks like his sister, great shoulder, great balance, great hip. And there's one characteristic in this family, which is why he has now 3 unraced half sisters. Our filly developed a keratoma in a hoof that had to be surgically repaired, and it just didn't make it to where she could make it back to the races. So the characteristic in this family is they're all crooked. They all have very crooked legs in front. The mother has it. I've seen the mother on the farm, and my thought process was if the mother could deal with it, the babies could deal with it. So Most Strike was a horse that did make my list at the October Fasig-Tipton yearling sale. I liked him a lot. That sale, we had topped out our client who was buying horses to race, yearlings that we were buying to race. And we were shopping for a gentleman who wanted horses to pinhook. So he was a horse I would have bought for somebody to become a racehorse and be in a racing stable, but he would not have been a horse that I would have bought to pinhook, because some of these 2-year-old buyers, to push on a horse with the legs that he has to make it to a 2-year-old auction might have been difficult on that horse. Plus, being by Uncle Mo, as athletic as he was, I knew he was going to cost in the 300,000 range, and he went for 350. So I loved him as a yearling. You know, you love him from the side profile. He's a gorgeous horse. He's bred by Blue Heaven Farm, and they have done a wonderful job with their breeding program, breeding horses like Grace Adler for Baffert. Last year Grace Adler was really putting up stuff. So they do a great job with their breeding program. This is obviously another horse that's evident of that. And, you know, me being sentimental, I want to see this horse win a grade one, but sitting back, he's going to be a major contender in the Hopeful or Champagne and continue on towards the Breeders' Cup.
You know, it's interesting, on our other show, we do a show on Past the Wire TV called Saratoga Saturday with Dawn Lupel and myself. Dawn loved this horse going into the race, and she explained why. Was it like her best bet of the day? And she explained why. And the first thing she mentioned was Featherbed and her knowledge of her and what kind of racehorse she was, and a little bit about her history and how, you know, she liked Most Strike in part because of that, but she loved Most Strike and Featherbed.
I think Featherbed, and I, you know, we could ask Todd at some point, but I think it was one of his top contenders for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies that year. And I remember the breeder mentioning it to me, but I forgot why they had to scratch her. But they did have to scratch her. But I mean, she was very, very talented, and it's showing, you know, it's interesting when you get these families that, yes, maybe the siblings weren't able to make it because their front legs are a little bit too much like their mother, but the fact that those daughters are replicating through their progeny shows how talented that their mother was.
Absolutely. I will say this about that race. I do think, as good as Motown was, Most Strike rather, as good as he was, I think there were 2 horses in that race that looked to me like they got a lot out of the race and are horses to watch going forward. One of them was Andiamo a Firenze, who I think showed some guts and you know, ran the kind of race that I would look for him to improve off of. Improve enough to beat Brad's horse as a 2-year-old, or in some of these upcoming races. You know, maybe not. I mean, 2-year-olds have a tendency to make big jumps, but I definitely thought he ran the kind of race that showed me he's going to go forward and get better and be, a force in some of these 2-year-old races, especially the one-turn ones. Stretching out, I wasn't so sure, and I wouldn't throw the towel in on the horse that I like, Curly Jack, just yet. I didn't expect him to go to the lead and have to fight for the lead. I thought Tyler would kind of sit with him a little bit, and he took him to the lead. And I think the horse has the ability to sit and might get better once they try that tactic with him. And I'm interested to see if that's correct. So I think there are at least 3 in there that are horses to watch going forward and could wind up in the big show come November, for sure.
I agree with you, John. I think Kelly Breen's horse, physically in the paddock, I like that horse a lot. I liked Todd's horse Forte in the paddock. I think if I remember correctly.
I thought he outlooked the field, Forte. He was, to me, the biggest disappointment, because I said, if this horse runs like he looks, they're running for second. I mean, I thought he outlooked the field by far.
Yeah, I mean, he's a Scopy Son of Violence, looks very, very good. I know, Spendthrift was a bit disappointed. We kind of joked. I joked with Ned Toffee in the paddock, and they had 2 Bolt d'Oros, and they were hoping we'd go. And I said, I need Mo Strike to win. And he said, oh, no, we need ours to win for why am I blanking? Sorry, I've been running around at Saratoga, so my memory is not what it was. But basically, they really wanted Bolt d'Oro to jump off. So we said, hey, if we dead heat, we're happy. But I think Forte is a horse that's gonna mature and get better. I don't disagree with you on Curly Jack. I mean, they went very fast early with these babies. And so I think it also set up for a horse like Mo Strike, who's talented to pick up the pieces going 22:45. Obviously they went 22:45, 58 and finished up in 1:11. So they did slow as the race continued to go onward. So horses like Todd's Forte, who's going to be more 2 turns, and horses like Curly Jack, if he learns to sit and rate, they will move forward. I think Mo Strike continues to move forward as well. And Brad Cox has shown that he's extremely good with 2-year-olds and dangerous come Breeders' Cup. So
no question. No question. The Diana, the first grade 1 of the meet. I think there were 6 horses in the race. 4 of them were trained by Chad Brown.
Yes.
The most lightly regarded by many, not by me, but by many in Italian, won the race wire to wire, set the course record. If you can believe the times, I'm not so sure you can. I think there were some discrepancies with the fractions, but we'll say she did.
They hand time that race as well. So the clockers, I had been up. They basically at Saratoga, they've got 2 gentlemen who hand time the race, who are the placing judges, and then they have the official clock. So they would have probably checked. But I can agree with you. I do think that the teletimer, there might be a slight glitch with it.
Well, there was one race on the grass. They went the first quarter in 22. They went 49 to the half, and I immediately said, "That's just not right."
Yeah, something's a little off on the calibration.
Not right. So
yeah,
I don't know, but as far, I thought that was a very interesting race, especially if we're going to talk about it in terms of Breeders' Cup implications. Okay. Because the horse that was the heavy favorite, Bleecker Street, I think was 7 for 7 going into the race, who I didn't like that day, and didn't win. I think is maybe the least likely of Chad's 4 to wind up in the Breeders' Cup. And that's probably a very unpopular opinion that I'll take a lot of heat for, especially if she winds up there. But my thought on her going into the Diana and going forward is this: when you have a filly who's that precocious and that good early in her career, that she goes 7 for 7 over a relatively short period of time, my thought and inclination is always, well, how much can she keep this up? I mean, there's only so many personal ensigns. There's only so many Zenyatas. There's only so many of these horses that just rattle off those wins, especially early in the year, and then keep it going. You know what I mean? And in the Breeders' Cup, I mean, I would like her a lot more as a Breeders' Cup type horse if okay, we stop on her now, we bring her back with a prep, and then go into the Breeders' Cup off one prep. Then I think, yeah, she might be, a contender. But if they keep running her all throughout the year, I think we've kind of seen her best early, peaked too early, some would say. But that was kind of my opinion. And I thought, 7 for 7, she's ripe to get beat. I thought Rogier, with the way the pace looked on paper, was going to be the one to beat her. But the only two that I really thought had a chance to win, and this is something we discussed on the Saratoga Today show, were Rogier and In Italian. And I leaned to Rogier because I just thought the pace scenario favored her more than it did In Italian. But In Italian is in my opinion an extremely well-bred filly that's improving and just getting good, just learning how to run, just putting it all together, and is probably the best of Chad's four going forward, unless he can kind of figure out whatever it was that made Rogier run that monster race first time he ran her, and what prevented her from running back to that race now 2 times in a row. But those were the two I thought absolutely stood out as horses that we will hear a lot from potentially going forward, especially the winner In Italian.
Yeah, I think you might be a little biased there with your
Okay.
background being from Italy. No,
It could be. Hey, an Italian jockey won at Monmouth the other day, Andrea Mezzatesta. I put a story up about it right away on the Past the Wire. A lot of people didn't pay no attention to it, but he's from Italy, got his first win at Monmouth, so it could be a little bit of a bias.
I like her a lot. I agree with you. I've liked In Italian for a while, and what was extremely impressive was the fraction she put up in the race. And I said, this filly's gonna fold. Like, she's got to fold at some point. There's no way she's gonna keep these other fillies off of her back. As talented, because looking in the paddock physically, Bleecker Street looked like the best filly physically in the paddock. She's built differently than these other fillies. In Italian looked very good, but it was kind of like Bleecker Street really stood out as maybe a cut above from a physical standpoint. But seeing an Italian do what she did, it's very hard to say that Bleecker Street might come back. And what we've seen from Chad with his very good fillies over time is he typically rests them in the winter, and then they come out and they run in April and May, and then he gears them up and they go. So the fact that Bleecker Street, but In Italian's done the same thing, but Bleecker Street has been putting performance after performance after performance together throughout. I think she ran, I know she ran in January. So, I mean, this filly she ran in on 10/23, and then she had a 3-month break, 2.5 months, and then really started gearing up in January and has run pretty much almost on a monthly basis. They changed in between the Hillsborough and when she ran in the Modesty Stakes at Churchill, they gave her a little bit more time. But come Breeders' Cup time, she's going to have a lot of races under her belt. I mean, he can start spacing her out now a little bit as he gets closer, but now you're potentially in a situation, we discussed this, with when you're in races, you're going to have to win one to get in. Not saying that Peter Brandt probably wouldn't be willing to supplement the filly into a race, but I do think the campaign might wear on her later in the year versus, as you said, In Italian is a filly that's starting to figure it out. And I think she really figured it out in that race. Do I think she's going to get loose in other races like that and just be able to tear away from them? I don't think so, but I don't think there's other horses that can put up those fractions and kick on and pull away from horses like she did. So, as you said, Rogier, she ran great right off the plane from France in the Breeders' Cup. And now is kind of, she's having trouble finding herself. But his other filly, Technical Analysis, we know can put up some very big races, as she showed at Keeneland last year in the Queen Elizabeth, which I think she was beat by Chad's other filly, Shantasara. And that's another filly that we're not talking about right now. Shantasara is another big filly in his barn. So I think Technical Analysis got the typical Chad Brown, you're off for the winter and you're starting to come back now. Obviously, her first start of this season was in April, like he tends to do, April, May, and then now July at Saratoga. So I see Technical Analysis getting better. I see Bleecker Street, they're going to have to figure out, do they back off, give her a little breather, and then get her geared back up? And then I see an Italian continuing to go forward as well. So I think those two fillies, obviously, who ran 1-2, will be his contenders. And then he'll need to figure out, once Shantasara's back in the mix, what's going on with those three. Because to me, those are the three that'll be obviously probably the best from the U.S. this year.
Really interesting. Okay. Interesting. I'll add one thing to that before we move on is I don't think that In Italian is a filly that absolutely needs the lead to win, because she does have a couple of races in her past performances where she sat and came. I think she came second in one or two of them. But she did show the ability to sit off another horse and still rally. So now that she's figuring the game out, she may be able to do that as well, and just turn out. I just think she has the potential to be really, really, really good. And I think, like you said, those fractions were impressive. And like we said on that pilot and passenger jockey show, Joel gets the reputation as being a great finisher, but he's a great speed rider. He's just great when he goes on the lead and gets loose and they go fast, but they just relax for him. And he's got that extra gear and that strong hand ride. And he's just really, really good on the lead. And I don't think he gets enough recognition for that. The last horse we're going to talk about, runs in a division that's as probably a specialized division as you can have in horse racing, and that's the turf sprinting division. And this horse just keeps rattling off win after win after win, and does it from off the pace turf sprinting, which I think is maybe even a little bit more impressive, because even though you get a lot of speed in these turf sprints, a lot of times it's hard to make up as much ground as you have to in order to win. But Christophe Clements and Reeves Thoroughbred's Big Invasion just keeps winning.
He was impressive yesterday. I don't think there's any two ways about it. I thought that horse was significantly impressive. In the paddock, he's a very good-looking horse that looks built to do exactly what he's being asked to do, which is go 5.5, potentially 6 on the grass. That's where his sweet spot is. He's obviously has improved. He did win at Churchill in the William Walker Stakes and kind of regressed on numbers there, but still put up a win. Seeing him yesterday, I still think there's room for improvement with him going forward, just by what I saw physically in the paddock. He's obviously, he's highly tuned and tightly tuned. You're not going to get him fitter, but there are some areas of improvement that I still think that if maybe Christophe fixes a couple of those things, this horse gets even better. So interesting. I have a hard time imagining him getting better, because he just seems so good right now, and the thing that, looking ahead to the Breeders' Cup, and it's a long way off, but just because it's the turf sprint division, you already know that when you look at the past performances, you're going to have 10, 12 horses in there, and there's going to be a ton of speed on paper. Right. It's just going to be that way. You know what I mean? So ton of speed on paper, and here's a horse that can, run past that kind of speed late. So I think continue. Sorry, John.
No, I was going to say, I think it's tough to say he's not going to be a major player in the Breeders' Cup Sprint come November.
Going 1 minute and 4 for 5/8. I remember I looked at the time and said, how far are they running? And it's like, oh, they 5.5. And I'm like, well, how fast did they go for the 5? And it was 54 and change. And so, seeing these types of fractions and seeing a horse that can run into those types of fractions and close on horses. They went 21 and 2, 43 and 4, 54 and 4, and then, finished up in 5 and 4 for the last, half or last 16th of a mile. So these are significant sprinters, even if it was just a, little listed stake. So, in the United States, it's a division that we don't tend to see a lot of because we don't have a lot of grade 1s. It's interesting. I have guys that tend to put horses in front of me and say, hey, what do you think about this horse in America? And I said, look, it's a It's a turf sprinter. Fillies, we really have nothing for them in terms of keeping them and campaigning them on a trail that increases their value and buying them out of Europe. Luckily, this horse was bred in the US, but it's a division where I'd love to see at a certain point in time, and you see it at Ascot, where we have grade 1 races for sprint turf horses as we lead up to races like the Breeders' Cups. Because I think a lot of these horses are overshadowed because it's a listed stake or it's a grade 3. There's not that prestige behind turf sprinters yet in America, but they are significant horses. So I like this horse a lot.
And Wesley Ward's horse really didn't bring it yesterday, Asymmetric, but that horse was very competitive in Group 1, 2, and 3 races over in Europe. So I mean, it's hard to argue that there was not some class behind.
They had a bit of trouble with him in the paddock,
yeah.
and I think they need to kind of, obviously, Wesley and what some people don't understand about Wesley's program. And I've had owners ask me about could we send this horse to Wesley? And I said, that horse doesn't fit Wesley. Wesley tends to do keep horses extremely fresh. He works them, but he keeps them fresh. And when they get so fresh, if you don't have their mental constitution about them to be calm while also being on the muscle, you can tend to lose a couple things because they'll get overexcited because there's just too much energy in their system. I liked, and a lot of trainers might agree, when you're setting up for the 100 meters, you want calm, fast. You want to be on the blocks, ready to explode off the blocks. It's the same thing in a turf sprint. If you're a little bit too excited where you could jump the gun and maybe miss the gun, or a little bit too excited to where you're not fully paying attention and you miss the gun when it fires and you miss the break a little bit, it can very much hinder you in a race. And so seeing that horse in the paddock, Jamie Spencer had a lot of trouble getting up. He kept balking from the crowd in the paddock at Saratoga. I think as they do a little bit more work with him, getting him settled mentally, he definitely has the physique, from what I can see physically, to be a player. They just have to work on the mental aspect to get this horse to fire his big shots in the United States.
Interesting. I thought he was actually going to run better. I had a feeling that, he wasn't going to do that same speed runaway that he did first time what Wesley ran him, and they were going to try and take him off the pace, just didn't rally. But I think he does go for, the statement that there was some classy horses behind Clement's horse. And another thing I'll say is, Clement's one of those trainers, in my opinion, obviously great trainer, great horseman, great career. But I think one of his strong suits is when he gets a horse good, he has the ability to keep them good. So, I think he knows how much and when to run them and can keep them at a high performance level throughout a campaign or throughout a year, and keep coming back at the right time and backing off at the right time. And I think that's really one of his strengths. So I think this horse is going to be a tough sprinter all year long, right up until the Breeders' Cup, which
I agree with you, especially with these turf sprinters. I mean, he had the 2 gray horses for the same owner. I can't remember their names. Do you remember who I'm talking about? They had green and pink silks.
Yeah, Patricia Generazio horses.
Yeah. And he always had those turf horses sprinting, ready to fire every time. Both of them, it was just a matter of, he had one that was a little better than the other, but it was just a matter of which one was more ready on the day. So especially in this type of division, turf sprinting, I think Christoph's very good at keeping these horses on top of their game throughout a campaign.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the last thing I'll close with, and my answer is no. But when we discuss these, did we see any Breeders' Cup horses at Saratoga or Del Mar this past week? We're going to look at the stake races. But if something jumps up in a maiden special weight race, be it turf or dirt, that says, hey, look at me, I may wind up at the big dance, we'll mention it. I did not see that the first week of Saratoga. I don't know if you did, but I watched those maiden special weight races and allowance races with enthusiasm to see those next monsters, so to speak, come out. I'm not going to say freaks because I don't like that, but I didn't see anything that jumped out at me opening week. You?
I don't think there's necessarily a horse that I would say jumped out as being a Breeders' Cup contender, but there was a horse that impressed me yesterday, and it was interesting. Dominique and I, we wanted to see what this paddock bar was all about, and they've done a great job. So our worries of somebody dropping a drink on a horse, it's far enough off the rail that they'll just hit the people underneath them. They won't hit the horses.
Well, there's no problem with that. Right.
So exactly, if somebody gets a little wet, ruins a suit, no big deal. But we were at the bar and we met a group of people, and they said they had a horse in a race, and they said, we asked which horse, and they handed me the program and said, who do you think wins the 9th race? I said, nobody beats the 6th. Nobody beats Ray Handel's horse. I said, 3-2 zone looks like he's going to be the horse to beat in this spot. They said, well, that's interesting. Nobody's picking this horse, and everybody's telling us that we have no shot. I thought the horse was pretty impressive yesterday in that 3 other than, and how he won it. So I actually think this is a horse that might come into the picture a little bit of the stakes sprinting scene and potentially could get better. He was moved to Ray 3 starts ago. So Ray won the 2 other than with the horse. The horse ran second in the 3 other than at Belmont, and then won the 3 other than yesterday at Saratoga. So, besides putting him in for a tag, their only option is to go on a stakes company. But I thought there were good enough horses in that race that he beat some decent horses and might get in the mix. I don't think he's a Breeders' Cup horse yet, but if he continues to improve the way he has with Ray, he might be a horse on the sprint scene that could be making a little bit of noise.
Oh, I agree. I watched that race very closely, and I did think he had a chance. I thought there were really only two horses that could win, and they ran 1-2, Chad's horse and him. And I would have favored Chad's horse, but what I thought about immediately after the race was how good he ran, because Chad's horse kind of got a good break on the inside and got in front of him and got the trip and shoulda, woulda, coulda had him put away. And he looked beat at first when Chad got that jump on him on the inside. And then he kind of kicked in again when he saw Chad's horse out in front of him and just, ran past him and did it very, very, very smartly. And I was like, wow, that was a little better than I thought. So everybody was not against him. I did think he had a legitimate chance, but he surprised me the way that he did it. And I did think Chad's horse would beat him, especially if you would have told me trip-wise, Chad was going to get the jump on him and really kind of have him put away. But he just, had that little extra gear that last 16th or 8th of a mile.
Well, and it was interesting. And it was really, really kind of heartwarming because, again, I didn't know who the person was. He said he owned a horse in a race on the day. He says, who do you like in the 9th? I say, nobody can beat the 6th. He says, well, I own the 6th. I said, oh, well, great. Congrats. And so then after the race, I saw the guy congratulated him. And, he's from Mechanicville. I guess he went to school with Chad Brown. So he was just in tears, getting his win at Saratoga. So it was great to see.
And beat Chad, who we went to school with.
Exactly. So, maybe he'll rib Chad a little bit when he sees him, but yeah.
Maybe Chad probably happy for each other, but
yeah.
And they ran 1-2, the guys from Mechanicville. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's a wrap. What do you think?
I think it's good. I don't know if there's any more Breeders' Cup type horses we could talk about. When we see them, we'll definitely let you know. So you guys aren't scrambling on the day before the Breeders' Cup trying to figure out who you like.
Oh, I assure you, with the 2 meets we got coming up, we will see them. And we may see some next Saturday on the Jersey Shore at Monmouth and the Haskell. I think that's next Saturday coming right up. So that's,
I think it's interesting. And John, you and I talked about this Derby time. And I said, Taiba's a summertime horse. He's maybe not at the right stage of his career right now. Obviously, he's back in the Baffert barn, so it's going to be highly controversial if Baffert knocks out another Haskell win. But that was a horse that I always felt this would be his time of year when he'd come into his own. So it'll be interesting to see.
And he's got to face Jack Christopher, who's got a little bit of a buzz and a lot of talent to back up that buzz behind him, who I believe is going 2 turns for the first time. That's an exciting race. You got two, no budding horses that are really, just loaded with potential, and both of them really have the right to be any kind of horse going forward. And the 3-year-old division, with Rich Strike winning the Derby, with Early Voting winning the Preakness, with Mo Donegal winning the Belmont and now being out for the rest of the year, 3-year-old championship is far from decided. Very, very interesting.
Well, it's an exciting group overall. I mean, we saw what Chargett did now that he's been given a little bit of time to come into his own again. Taiba's obviously there. Baffert's back, so you're going to see some of his 3-year-olds come back into the mix. Jack Christopher, obviously, and then Chad's other horse,
Early Voting, Zandon.
Zandon is, the people are done and how he looks out here at Saratoga. So, it's
I saw Zandon work the other day at Saratoga. Yeah. Now, I'm not an expert at watching workouts. Okay, I'll admit that. I'm not but I saw his work the other day, and I watched it like twice, and then I watched it again, and I was like, wow, talk about a horse that to me just looks like he's gotten 5 lengths better than he was on the first Saturday in May. I don't know if I can quantify that, because like I said, I'm not an expert work watcher or a horseman or a trainer, but just from watching horses as long as I have been, I was like, wow, this horse has gotten not just better, he's gotten a lot better than he looked good then. He looked good then.
Yeah. He was a horse physically when you saw him as well. He was kind of leggier, lankier, a little lighter, that you would say late 3, early 4, this horse is really going to find himself, just from a stance of it looked like he went going into the Derby and maybe earlier in the year that he was hitting a growth spurt. And so obviously as these 3-year-olds develop, they will hit growth spurts, as people sometimes criticize us for. These horses aren't fully what they become, especially as colts, until they're, midway through their 4-year-old year. There's a big transition from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, and then 4-year-old to 5-year-old. And I was lucky enough to see a lot of that in a barn like Richard Mandela's. But this was a horse that I said, he looks like he's still growing. And once he has, that obviously takes energy. Training for a Kentucky Derby takes energy. So when this horse gets a breather and he kind of levels out in a growth spurt, he'll put on more weight, he'll get better. So it's interesting to see that. And obviously what's exciting is that there's no standout in this 3-year-old division. So they're all still around. So we should have a phenomenal Breeders' Cup Classic filled with a ton of talented 3-year-olds.
Yeah, I think the 3-year-olds are going to be a lot of the noise in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I think a big tell in the Chad Brown barn is going to be who winds up on which of his horses.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be interesting to see who winds up where.
Right.
That way. But we'll see. A lot of great racing to do. I really enjoyed this show a lot, because I think this is fun stuff going forward. So I think that's a wrap.
Absolutely. We'll cut it there.
All righty. Ciao for now. We'll be back with more Unfiltered before you know it.
Awesome.
10,000 words fighting back, coming down to the finish. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is one stunning picture. Honorary B is full out now, second on the outside. Saratoga live, 1,000 words has done it.
DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Nobody does it better.